All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, as always, joined by Daniel Starkand. Again, this is DodgerHeads, presented by Dodger Blue, home of the 2020 World Series champion. Daniel, I was looking at the schedule tonight. We've got 5 more shows after tonight until we are talking about real live baseball games that count. I believe this is our last Monday night before spring training games actually start. So it's an exciting time to be a baseball fan. I'll just ask you right off the top, are you ready for baseball to be back?
I've been ready for a while, Jeff. Yeah, I'm absolutely ready to go. I'm stoked. There hasn't been a whole lot of content coming out from Camelback Ranch, but I've been soaking up whatever I could. It's understandable, there's not a whole lot of people down there because of the COVID restrictions. But yeah, I'm excited. I love seeing the boys in blue back on the field. I love hearing the sound of the mitts on bullpens. I love hearing the sound of the crack of the bat in BP. I'm so ready to go, ready for that first game.
Yeah, I got a chance to interview Andy McCullough last week from The Athletic, senior writer, former Dodger beat writer. And I joked with him right off the bat. I said, it feels like it's been so quick. I mean, they win the World Series basically the way end of the fall. And he was like, are you kidding me? He's like, I've been trying to write about baseball for the last 3 months. Like, I am desperate for baseball. It's taken too long. So I get it. And by the way, I'll throw a shameless plug. Last week, we had Andy McCullough on the show. I believe we put that out Thursday or Friday. He's the best. That interview was great. He's always got great insight, great content, just a great person. And I'll throw this. We kind of threw a curveball, and I got a chance to sit down with Micah Johnson as well. Micah Johnson, former Dodger, turned artist. And I'll admit, I'm a little unclear exactly what goes on with his art. There's some crypto stuff going on. This is what I know. He sold millions of dollars worth of art this weekend. If you've been following his Twitter, millions of dollars worth of art this weekend. He was on the show just last week, a couple days before that. So definitely check those videos out. We're hoping to get more fun content like that coming down the pike. So we appreciate you watching us, folks, joining us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, or if you're just watching this recorded on YouTube, we appreciate you. Here's the plan for tonight. We're going to do a spring training preview here in a moment. Daniel and I both picked out a few things we're looking forward to. Obviously, pitchers and catchers have reported, but as far as once things start moving, some things we're looking forward to. I've got some quotes to run by Daniel in a new game we're going to play. And then, as always, we got some mailbag questions that we'll get to at the end. So if you're joining us, please be sure to keep those questions, throw it to us towards the end of the show in the chat, and we will get to those. But let's start with each of us sharing 3 storylines that we're wanting to hone in on and monitor over the next 5 to 6 weeks of spring training. Again, April 1st is opening day, so we're about 5 weeks away. And for me, I'll start with my number one storyline. I guess I shouldn't say these are in order. I got 3, you got 3. But the number one storyline to me is Trevor Bauer for the Dodgers. Now, I could take that storyline a bunch of different directions. And while his Twitter feed is asking to be commented on as he tries to feud with just about every Mets fan and Mets pitcher on Twitter, I'm going to do my best to keep this to on-field stuff with Bauer, because take everything else off the table. I think even just as a baseball player, he's going to be fascinating to watch this year. And basically, the reason I say that is because, who is Trevor Bauer as a pitcher? I think is a fair question. We could say, hey, 2020 NL Cy Young. Yes, absolutely true. But this is a guy who's been up and down. In the past 4 seasons, he has 2 top 6 finishes among starting pitchers when it comes to WAR. He also has 2 outside the top 25 finishes. So he has 2 ace, number 1 pitcher, Hall of Fame type seasons, but then also a couple seasons where he looked like a number 2. And really, if you go back beyond 2018, it's a lot more number 2, number 3 type starter stuff. So he's a driveline guy. Believing he's improved isn't crazy. We know about the rumors of pitching substances a lot of guys use. MLB's not doing anything about it. So it's really possible the 2020 numbers are real. But that's what I'm curious to see. We both think the Dodgers are the best in baseball at improving guys that come in. The question is, can they do that with Bauer? Can they unlock the best version? And I guess spring training, yes, it's a time to mess around. If you remember last year, he's the guy who told the Dodgers what pitch was coming in the middle of a spring training game. So that gives you a sense of maybe how seriously he takes some of this stuff. But I'll be curious to see how dominant he looks. I'm hoping he can rein it in online. But on the field, I'm curious to see just how dominant he looks in spring training.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'm looking forward to seeing Bauer on the mound. I feel like every spring, it's not like uncommon for us to be looking forward to seeing the new guys, right? Like we, for the most part, we know what Clayton Kershaw is going to look like. We know what Julio Urias is going to look like. Like I want to see these new guys, and Bauer's at the top of the list. And also, in addition to what he does on the mound, I also want to see, what he's like in that clubhouse.
Yeah.
Is he fitting in? Is he getting along with guys? Is he helping guys, pitchers? That's something that he's advertised that he's able to do. We know he's a big driveline guy. We know he's into analytics. He's really smart when it comes to pitching.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what impact he has on other guys on the staff. We saw this past week, I forgot who said it, but someone said he's already throwing partners with Kenley Jansen, which to me, that's awesome.
Hey.
That contract is 100% worth it if he fixes Kenley. Kind of reminds me of Mookie with Austin Barnes last year.
Come on, Kenley Jansen has not reached that level. Let's cool it on the Austin Barnes comps for Kenley Jansen, okay?
Hey. I'm just saying, if Bauer could fix Kenley the way Mookie did Barnes, and that's his contract's worth it to me. So yeah, I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing what Bauer's got.
So here's a question: if you could pair Trevor Bauer with any pitcher in the Dodger organization to just help him, coach him up a bit, is Kenley Jansen number one on that list? Brewstar Gratterall, maybe?
I was going to say, if it's only for this season, it's Kenley. But considering Kenley, this is the last year of Kenley's deal, I'd probably look more long-term. I'd probably pair him up with Dustin May and see what he could cook up there.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, and I think Kershaw, he commented on the personality type stuff as well, just saying, hey, we've had different personality types come through this locker room. He didn't seem too concerned about it. So I'm with you. There's a lot to watch on the Trevor Bauer saga, but again, I'll even just focus on the on-field stuff. Really fascinated to see just which version we get. Do we get the 2020 Cy Young, or do we get the 2019, really good pitcher, but outside the top 25? So that's number one for me. What's the first storyline that comes to mind for you? Again, these aren't in order necessarily, but what's one of the things you're watching for in spring training?
Yeah. My first two are kind of similar here. For me, every spring, I'm always looking at like kind of the fringe roster type guys, because those are the guys who are really competing for spots. Like we know all the Dodgers stars, all their starters, like they're just getting ready for the season, right? They don't care about results too much. They're just trying to stay healthy and get ready for opening day. So there's not a whole lot to watch with Mookie Betts in spring training, right? So I'm looking at the fringe type guys, and my first one, it's the bullpen. The Dodgers have a ton of bullpen depth, but I feel like there's only a few like quote unquote locks to make the bullpen. So I kind of wrote them down here. We're going back to a 26-man roster this year, so probably about 14 pitchers, I'd say total. Take out the 5 starters. We know who the rotation will be. That leaves 9 bullpen spots. By my count, there's about 6 locks. That's Victor Gonzalez, Gratterall, Kenley, Joe Kelly, Corey Knebel, and Blake Trinan. Like, if those guys are healthy, they're on the opening day roster. That leaves about 3 spots left, and those are the guys I'm looking for, whether it be Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin. What do they look like this spring? Could they find a spot in the rotation maybe? Maybe if Julio doesn't look great, probably not, but or are they going to be relievers to start the year? How's that going to play out? I know they're going to be getting built up as starters, but we'll see where they start the year. And then as far as the bullpen goes, I'm looking at Brandon Morrow, who everything we've heard so far has been good. He's believed to be healthy, and if Brandon Morrow's healthy and back to his previous form, that could be a dangerous weapon for the Dodgers out of the bullpen. And there's a few other guys we've heard good things about. Out Vesia, the guy they got from Miami, they've been talking, big about him. Garrett Cleavinger, those are kind of battling for one spot along with Scott Alexander. And then also Jimmy Nelson, watch for if he's healthy. Is he a starter? Is he a reliever? Is he kind of the swingman, Ross Stripling type? So yeah, those are the guys I'm watching for. As far as like guys like Vesia and Cleavinger go, I've like straight up never seen those guys pitch. So I'm just looking forward to seeing what they got stuff wise. And yeah.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this: Joe Kelly, obviously one of your 6 locks. Is that strictly because of the salary, or do you think he is sort of in a good enough relief pitcher to justify being one of the 6 locks?
Yeah, I just think it's because of the contract. Like, they can't option him to the minor leagues. I think if they could trade him, they probably would have by now, or maybe they're trying to. I don't know. But yeah, it's just all about the contract. I don't think they're just going to DFA a guy making $8 or $9 million. And Kelly, when healthy, was actually like decent last year. I think he had He might have, his ERA might have been below 1 or slightly above. I'm not sure. Small sample size, obviously.
Yeah.
But right now he's actually dealing with some arm issues, so who knows if he'll even be healthy. I feel like he's kind of always banged up a little bit. I don't know what his deal is, but that would be if he, let's say he's not healthy and starts the year on the injured list, and that would be another spot opening up for all the other guys I just mentioned.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd throw out there too just a bunch of young arms as well. You've got Mitch White, you've got, Dennis Santana, you've got Gerardo Carrillo, you've got Uceda. Like, I mean, you just have all of these guys. Josiah Gray, yeah. And so it's like, Gray, I think most people are expecting to be down, but like a guy like Mitch White, I mean, he doesn't have much to prove at the lower levels. And, at some point, the Dodgers are going to have to make a decision on, do they continue to keep him as a starter, or do you look at the roster you have and say, hey, you know what, you're actually not, your future is not as a starter here. Then do you keep him as a starter as a trade piece? Do you convert him to a reliever? So I'm with you. I think that's a fascinating one to watch just to see how the bullpen rounds out. Because and Andrew Friedman, one of his quotes this week was, when they traded Floro and Kolarek, it was basically, okay, as soon as we signed Bauer, we knew that was one less like sort of pitching spot that was going to be available, and basically said, hey, I know this is a hard conversation to have, but the flip side is, if not this conversation, it could be, hey, we're sending you down to the minors, in 3 weeks. So definitely some depth there. So number 2 storyline for me is Gavin Lux, and this one's a crazy storyline. Heading into last season, Gavin Lux was the number 2 prospect in baseball according to MLB Pipeline, number 3 according to Baseball Prospectus, and number 4 according to Baseball America. Then he gets 69 at bats, hits 175, and was basically a nightmare defensively. So we go from 12 months ago, he's penciled into the starting second base job, to now, I think in a lot of people's minds, it's a massive question mark about what we're going to get from him. So you and I have said we believe in the guy. We're not giving up. This is a guy who turned 23 a couple months ago. And I think the key is don't forget about what he has done, right? How he got to the rankings that he got to. In 2019, every time I look at these numbers, it blows my mind. 2019, he played AA and AAA, where he was young for both levels, right? He hit 347 with an on base of 421 and a slug over 600 with 26 home runs in 113 games. So we're talking 35 plus home run pace while hitting 350. Now, some people might be thinking, well, what did he do at AA versus what did he do at AAA? Okay, well, at AAA, he hit 392 with an on base of 478 and a slug of 700 with 13 home runs in 49 games. Okay. So again, almost 40 home run pace, hitting 400 with an on base of 500 as a 22-year-old, so absolute insanity. Now we've been over it. 2020 for Lux, a weird year. Once summer camp starts, he's late to camp for an undisclosed reason. Obviously, I think most people are guessing COVID. He doesn't want to say, so we'll leave it at that. But the point is, it was a critical season. He was behind. Everything gets thrown off. And are we really supposed to be surprised that of all the guys on the roster, it was the 22-year-old with all the pressure in the world that struggled to adjust in 2020, right? So if I'm buying stock of anyone on the Dodgers, I think it's Lux, just because I think it's too low. And so I'm excited to see if he can silence the doubters. Now, he hasn't done well in spring training either of the 2 years he's been with the team. So spring training, it's hard to gauge. You have some guys like Puig a few years ago who absolutely lights it on fire, Cody Thomas, those types of guys. Most guys struggle, and then for whatever reason, the regular season comes, they just kind of flip a switch. I'm fascinated to see Lux. Can he field second base, or does he continue to have struggles there as far as throwing the ball? Can he hit for average? Can he hit for power? I think Lux is a really fascinating storyline to watch this spring.
Yeah, and to your point about him struggling in the spring in the past, he's talked about that before, and he said he's a rhythm type. He usually needs more at bats than anyone else to get for the season. So it's not surprising that he struggled in spring, but I feel like this is a spring where he really can't struggle because he kind of has the most to gain and the most to lose from this spring. And that's why he's the number 1 guy to watch for, as far as he could go like so many different ways. He could, if he comes out and hits well in spring, he could be the starting everyday second baseman for the Dodgers. If he doesn't do well, he could be in AAA. Or it could be somewhere in the middle. He could be a bench platoon type guy. Like, there's so many different possibilities, and it's all going to come down to how he performs this spring. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be watching Gavin Lux. Like you said, he's still just 23. So like, even if he comes out and has a bad spring and starts the year in AAA, like, to me, I'm still not jumping off the bandwagon if that happens. Like, if he starts the year in AAA, that's totally fine. The Dodgers can manage with, Chris Taylor and Max Muncy getting some time at second. Like, they got plenty of options. The new guy they just picked up, Sheldon Noisy, that's another option as well. So they got plenty of second base options, but I'd say Gavin Lux has the highest ceiling of all those guys. Like, he's the second baseman of the future. It's just a matter of if he could go out and win the job this spring.
Yeah. And I mean, just as a reference point, I mean, he was higher ranked as a prospect than Corey Seager ever was, than Cody Bellinger ever was, than Walker Buehler ever was. I mean, it's not to say it's apples to apples, but when you look at some of the guys who are top 5 this year and you think Gavin Lux was in those shoes a year ago, and we haven't even, it's not like he played 125 games in a normal season and hit 190. Like, 2020 was bizarre. So to make these grand assumptions and change your mind about a guy after that. So again, he's still got to prove it. It's not to say, oh, well, we just give him the benefit of the doubt. He's still got to go out, but I'm excited about that. So number 2 for me is Gavin Lux. What do you got second on your list, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page as you. I'm looking at the fringe roster position players. I talked about the bullpen already. But as far as position players go, Dodgers are probably going to carry 12 or so. And by my count, they got 10 locks. Austin Barnes, Will Smith, Muncy, Seager, Turner, Mookie, Bellinger, Pollock, Taylor, and Rios. Like, those guys, if they're healthy, they're on the roster. That would leave just 2 more spots, maybe 3 if they carry one less pitcher. And the guys competing for those spots are, first of all, Lux. I think if he goes out and has a good spring, one of those spots is his. Like, I don't think he's really competing with anyone else as much as he's just competing with himself, kind of. But the other guys are all, competing for kind of one roster spot, and that's Zach McKinstry, Matt Beatty, and Sheldon Noisy, who they're all versatile. They could all play multiple positions. I'd say McKinstry is the most versatile of the bunch, so that probably gives him a leg up because they're kind of looking to replace Kike probably with this last bench spot. They don't want Chris Taylor to be the only guy with the versatility. So I think Zach McKinstry's got a good shot to make the roster. Matt Beatty's interesting because he's been in the big leagues for pretty much all of the last 2 years, but everyone kind of just forgets about him. I'd say the bad thing for him is he bats lefty, and the Dodgers, the rest of the roster is pretty much lefty. Like, if he was hitting righty, he'd probably have a better shot. So I'd say he's probably the odd man looking out, but he could also come out and have a monster spring, and he's proven, he could have some success, especially off the bench at the major league level. And then this Sheldon Noisy guy, I don't know a whole lot about him. They're saying he could be the next Max Muncy that they got from the A's. There's a lot of untapped power there. So I'll be curious to see what they have in him. He also has some versatility. He's a right-handed bat, so in theory, he's exactly what they're looking for. But as we've talked about so often, with this roster, there's so much talent that there's just not going to be an opening day roster spot for everybody. So someone's going to be, the odd man out here.
Yeah, and Gage West on YouTube throws out DJ Peters as another guy. I mean, there's going to be lots of those guys, right? Like Luke Raley and Zach Rex. For sure. Yeah, I mean, to me, the bullpen feels like, tell me if you agree with this. I feel like the bullpen is way more open-ended than the roster. I just feel like I feel like more confident in saying Lux and McKinstry get those last 2 spots offensively than I do about trying to figure out who the last 3 guys in the bullpen are. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree 100%.
And would you?
With that.
And I feel like Lux and McKinstry, are those the 2 guys that you would guess if you had to guess?
Yeah, I'd say Lux. Like I just said, like, it kind of depends on him. So like the Sheldon Noisy guy is just kind of waiting in the wings if Lux has a bad spring and has to start in AAA. But I'd say those, if you had to ask Andrew Friedman and Dave Roberts which 2 would they want on the roster, hoping to make the roster, it would be Lux and McKinstry, because those are the guys who have a future in this organization, even as starting type players.
Yeah, and some of the outfielders too. I mean, we've said, Matt Beatty, it's kind of like we probably already know what Matt Beatty's going to be.
Yeah.
Maybe we'd like to see a guy like DJ Peters or something like that to see. I mean, because Edwin Rios, I think there's a lot of similarities between Peters and Rios if things play out a certain way, but I just don't see how he's going to get a shot. But who knows? I mean, Beatty was sort of the backup first baseman. Do they feel comfortable with Bellinger? Obviously, do they feel comfortable with Bellinger coming in and playing first base every once in a while? Do they want to try and avoid that? There's all sorts of ways that could play out. So definitely something to watch there. Number 3 for me, kind of along the same lines as last year, or my last one. I'm curious to watch David Price and see how his spring plays out. Now, everything has been positive about David Price, like beyond positive so far. But this is a guy who's a veteran. He skipped a year. And so the question is he fresher because he skipped a year, or is he rusty because he skipped a year, right? Can he justify his inclusion in the rotation ahead of Dustin May, ahead of Tony Gonsolin? Can he hold those guys back? Dustin May has said, hey, I'm pushing to be an opening day starter. Not the opening day starter, but one of the 5 starters when opening day hits.
He was last year, though.
He was, exactly. He was opening day last year. But, Price is the guy that you would imagine he'd have to go through more so than a guy like Urias. And let's not forget, the last time we saw David Price pitch, we've seen him pitch twice as a Dodger, twice in spring training a year ago. The second outing he had, 3 innings, no hits, 7 strikeouts. So we have seen a glimpse of sort of the upside of a guy like Price, but I'm excited to see what he has. Again, another guy I'm not as down on, I think, as some people seem to be, but I'm just really curious to see. Again, with veterans like Price, you try not to read a ton into spring training. Clayton Kershaw historically is not great in spring training, and then opening day rolls around and he throws a gem. So you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. But for a guy like Price, I think it'll be a big spring just to see what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of just took the words right out of my mouth. I think in my opinion, I think Price is probably, to start the spring, he's going to be a little rusty. He didn't pitch all of last year. He missed the 2019. So we're almost I don't know if it'll take 2 starts, 3 starts, but I think he'll eventually round into shape. And I think he'll make the opening day rotation. I'm expecting a big year out of David Price. You're right. The question is, will it be rust or will he be, fresh? And for me, at least with a 35-year-old, I'd lean towards probably fresh. I feel like a guy with that much mileage on his arm could definitely use a year off. We're not really sure what he was doing last year. Was he throwing to keep his arm in shape? Did he just take it all off? But I guess we'll find out. I'm excited to see what we're getting out of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, he's in a low pressure situation. He comes from Boston where he's got this massive contract. Everyone's expecting him to be the ace of that staff, basically. Now he's still getting paid the same amount, but nobody in Dodger world it's like, hey, could you just be a number 4 or 5 starter for us and we'll just call it good? I think at worst he's a number 3, and so I think he's going to exceed some expectations. So what do you got for your last one?
Yeah, my last one, kind of switching gears from first two. My last one is I'm looking out to see how healthy Cody Bellinger is at home run in Game 7 of the NLCS. He had off-season surgery. We haven't really gotten a whole lot of updates on how he's doing. But from all we've heard, he's on schedule to be ready for opening day. I think Dave Roberts said just before the start of spring training that he was taking one-handed swings. And the expectation was he'd be at two-handed swings by the start of position players reporting, which was today, and their first workouts tomorrow. So I guess we'll see if Cody's in the cages tomorrow taking full swings or not. I don't know when he's going to be able to play in a game. I would assume probably the first couple weeks he'd be just kind of in the backfields doing his own thing. I don't think we'll see him in a Cactus League game right away, but the expectation is he'll be ready for opening day. Now the Dodgers shouldn't feel a need to rush him at all if that's not the case. If he's ready 2 weeks after opening day, that's totally fine. They could get by without him. But the last thing we want is this shoulder issue to become a recurring type thing. Let's just hope that the surgery, got the issues out of the way, and eventually he'll be 100% and ready to have a bounce back year, because he'll be the first one to tell you that he's not happy with the year he had in 2020.
Yeah.
We talked about odd year Bellinger on this show. Usually in odd years, he goes to this MVP type season if he's healthy.
Yeah, no, it's one of the most amazing things to me that he had the World Series that he did, considering the shoulder. I mean, I talked during our live shows. I dislocated my shoulder twice and have sort of sublexed it where it pops out and pops back in. I mean, your arm is dead. Mine now he's getting better care than I was, giving myself at home. So, but man, for him to do what he did in the World Series, now he's gotten it cleaned up. So you'd imagine that things will be fine. But yeah, surgery knocks you out for a little bit. So even if it's something as simple as getting your swing back, getting your timing back, those kinds of things we'll definitely be watching. So, I mean, I'll add any other, aside from the 6 we mentioned, are there any other things just on the fringes, maybe storylines that, hey, if we had made this a list of 5 that we've would have made yours. And folks watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, I'm curious to hear, what are you all watching? Maybe you agree with one of the ones that we just threw out there, but are there storylines that you're watching for? So let us know in the chat. But Daniel, any other ones that we don't have to spend a ton of time on, but just that you would throw out there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it won't really have an impact on this season, but I'm always looking at the younger prospects during spring training, especially. I mean, a lot of them are invited to big league camp, and we'll see them in there. They get into the games, the Cactus League games, in like the 7th through 9th inning. So you really got to watch the whole game to see those guys. But I love watching to see. I want to see what the Dodgers have in like Bobby Miller, who was their first round pick last year. We've heard great things about him, but no one's really ever seen him. So I'm looking forward to him. Cody Hosey, Michael Bush, those guys we haven't seen a lot from.
Yeah.
The guys that probably aren't going to be, we probably won't see at the big league level in 2021, but that's the future right there. And even though the Dodgers farm system maybe isn't what it used to be, it's still really good. And Andrew Friedman's great at drafting, so I'm excited to see some of these guys.
Yeah, Bush is a guy that has been skyrocketing. Bobby Miller, those two. I mean, if you track some of the prospect lists that have come out, those are two guys. And another, I mean, Keibert Ruiz, like it's just a guy that there's no obvious place now. He's had some visa stuff, so he has not been reported yet, despite the fact that pitchers and catchers have shown up, which is too bad. But he's another guy that I just like to watch, and you hope he has a big spring, because he's a guy that the Dodgers have been connected to possibly trading, and so having a big spring could always help some stuff there. Let's see some folks in the chat. Jason says, I'm watching for whether Gratterall over times becomes the consensus closer. Yeah, I mean, spring training, you're going against lesser competition, so to see if he can get the strikeout numbers that he needs, to see if there's an increased ability to miss bats from a guy whose stuff makes it seem like. I think that's a good one. THP Knob, watching the bullpen, Knable, Jansen, some of the potential relievers. You mentioned Knable. I mean, that's one for me, another guy that I just want to see Knable. What are we getting out of Knable? I think that's an interesting one. Gage says the Morrow story. Not expecting him to make the roster, but curious to see how that turns out. Oscar agrees on Gavin Lux, whether he'll be able to come to form. So we'll see. So, yeah, I mean, lots like, oh yeah. And then the Big Cheese says, I want to know if Papa Pazos will be used. His mustache needs to be on the team. James Pazos, who's another guy. I mean, you didn't mention who, because there's so many guys, right? You could go down this list, but he's another guy that has had success at the major league level. And who knows? I mean, it's been a couple of years, but a lot of these guys show up to the Dodgers and maybe they tweak something. So we'll definitely see. Jason says, who ends up as the regular second baseman? Absolutely. So lots of storylines, lots of stuff to get excited about. And that's the good news. The Dodgers are going to start playing baseball games here pretty soon. And we're going to start getting some answers and input into that. So that's exciting. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Daniel, we're going to play a game. This is a new game, a game that I just invented. And basically, it's a very simple game, which is I'm going to throw out a quote from a Dodger interview or press conference, whatever we're calling them this week. Media availability, we'll say. And I want you to just react and tell me big deal or little deal. Some of these are obvious, some of these won't, but is this a big deal to you or a little deal to you? Okay, so these are in no particular order, just as I wrote them down, but this is Dave Roberts on Austin Barnes' role. He said, honestly, somebody asked, is he the backup? He said, I guess if you look at timeshare, I guess he's a backup, but I don't see it as such. I think it's 1 and 1A with Will Smith and Austin Barnes. Is that a big deal to you or not a big deal to you?
I'm going to say it's a big deal to me because I was kind of hoping that wouldn't be the case. But with that said, I'm not surprised by it. Like, if you look, it was kind of pretty much the same last year. Like, we all talked about how great Will Smith was and how not great Austin Barnes was. But as far as playing time goes, it was almost 50-50. Like, Will Smith started 32 games behind the plate last year, and Austin Barnes started 27 with Keibert Ruiz is the one other. So they were pretty much 50-50. I remember throughout the course of the season, we kept hoping like, all right, like when is Smith going to start getting more playing time? Like he's got to be the everyday catcher in the postseason. And it literally never happened. Even in the postseason, Barnes was still catching a lot. So this is a big deal to me because I really want Will Smith to take that next step and maybe become one of the best catchers in baseball. I just think his numbers are there for being that. It's just, he just needs to play more. So I wish it would be more like Smith starting like 4 out of 5 games or 4 out of 6, but it's not looking that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. This to me is a big deal because the Dodgers have one of the best hitting catchers in all of baseball. And if you're telling me that he's going to play between around 60% of the time, that's a problem to me because there's a massive drop-off between Will Smith and Austin Barnes. And I think the Dodgers have probably gotten spoiled from playing in a division that they wrap up rather quickly. And so maybe they downplay some of the regular season stuff. But as we're going to talk about, I mean, with the Padres there was a lot smaller margin of error. Now, I still think there's a gap, but that gap might be 6 games instead of 12 games, and that's a big deal. So to me, now maybe this is just posturing. We'll see how it all plays out. We know Clayton Kershaw likes to pitch to Austin Barnes. And who knows? So if it's just Clayton Kershaw once every 5 days, okay, I can get on board with that. If it's, 3 out of every 10 or something like that, I can get on board with that. But any more than 30% of the time with Austin Barnes there is a problem to me. So that one's a big deal to me.
And real quick, just we talked about it before. Something we want to see with Smith is for the pitchers we want the pitchers to get more comfortable throwing to him, so it's not a situation where Barnes has to catch in the postseason. And I feel like the only way to do that is for him to catch the pitchers a lot in the regular season. Like the only way they're going to get more comfortable is if they throw to him every single start or almost every single start. So and if it's a 50-50 timeshare, that won't be the case. So yeah. I'm with you. I'm hoping that's not how it's going to play out.
And we've got Ari says big deal. THP says not a big deal. So we'll see what happens. Okay, here's another one. This is Mark Pryor talking about Kenley Jansen. Sometimes he comes out, it's 89, 90. Other times it's coming out, it's 94, 95. It's something we're aware of. It's something we've been trying to unlock. I'll be honest with you. We haven't had success with it in the last year and a half, so we kind of changed course a little bit and tried something different this offseason. We'll see how it plays out. Big deal or not a big deal that the Dodgers have no clue about Kenley Jansen and why he can't be consistent velocity-wise.
Yeah. To me, this is a pretty big deal. I was gonna take the Pryor route and say we'll see if it's a big deal or not, because if it works, then it is a big deal. If it doesn't, then it's not a huge deal. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely noticed that too. We've all noticed it. Like, who is Kenley going to come out throwing 93, 94, or is he going to be 88, 89, 90? Like, and I feel like whenever, not necessarily when he throws harder, he has more success, but when he throws harder, he's getting the movement on his cutter that leads to him being successful. So yeah, to me, this is a big deal. Maybe, hopefully they unlock something with these new workouts he's been doing. I'm not exactly getting my hopes up, but yeah, we'll see.
I mean, and let's not forget, this is a guy that Dave Roberts, his pitching coach is saying, we're not really sure. We can't figure this out. The manager is saying he's our closer. So, I mean, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And look, I don't know enough about I appreciate the honesty from Mark Pryor because, I mean, I get it. Sometimes there's not an easy fix. And I'm not saying, hey, Pryor's a moron. He can't figure this out. But it just baffles me that you've got a guy that sometimes he can throw 94, 95, and sometimes it's 89, 90. And nobody knows. Now, I appreciate that they're trying something new. At least we're not trying the same thing over and over again and hoping with it for a different result, right? But we will see. We'll see with Kenley Jansen on that one.
Hey, maybe his throwing partner, who's also a mad scientist, Trevor Bauer, will be able to help with that.
We'll unlock it. Absolutely. Okay, here's Mark Pryor again. This is on Julio Urias. Pryor had 3 of these. He said some good quotes. He said, we're going to have to watch where he's at from a workload standpoint. If you go back and look at the timeline of when Julio came up, the injury, when he comes back in 18, what he did in 19, there's a lot of fragmented workloads we have to account for. We can't just turn him loose and say, here, try to go out and make 30 starts and pitch 200 innings. That would be reckless in some respects. Big deal or not a big deal to you? That they're saying basically of one of their 5 starters, he has no chance of making 30 starts and pitching 200 innings.
To me, that's not a big deal at all, just because of the depth that the Dodgers have. Like, if you got to skip Julio once or move him back a day, Dustin May or Tony Gonsolin. Maybe if this was like a different organization, it'd be a big deal. If let's say Julio was the ace or the number 2 in a different organization, that's a guy you want to get 200 innings from. But on the Dodgers, they don't need to get 200 innings from any of their starters. Like, if I had to guess, I'd say they don't. Maybe Bauer, if he stays healthy, he'd be the only one. But other than that, they're gonna take it easy with all these guys because they can, they got enough arms to do so. And B, you want to keep them fresh for the postseason. And Julio especially, it's important to remember, he's still really young. He's 25 years old, 24 years old. He's had arm issues in the past. So that's not a guy you want to just go out there, tell him throw 200 innings and maybe he gets hurt. So this is no big deal at all to me.
I agree with you. I think there's one part of me that's concerned. It's just at what point does he become a 30 start 200 inning guy? I mean, he's 25, and I get the argument here is, hey, he had a partial 2018, he had a partial 2019, and 2019 we'll get to. He was like 49 innings out of the bullpen. 2020 is a shortened season, so I kind of get that, but at the same time, it's like he's 25. I mean, the kid gloves were on him when he was a 19-year-old. I get it. As a 25-year-old. I'll be curious to see how that plays out. Now, this next one is related. Mark Pryor, one more time. He said, when asked about the possibility of a six-man rotation, he said, I think when we get into those long stretches of playing 12, 15, 18 games in a row, I think there's an argument to drop somebody in as a six-man just to give some guys breaks. I do think there's some value to it as we talk about the 60 to 162 games, and more so the 6 months, 7 months, and having guys strong toward the end of the season. So the Dodgers pitching coach basically coming out and saying, yeah, there's probably long stretches of the season where we might have a six-man rotation. Big deal or not a big deal to you?
I'm going to say it's a big deal just because it's exactly what I said last week when we had, I think it was a fan mailbag question asking if it makes sense to do a six-man rotation. And that's exactly what I said. When they have a lot of games in a row with no days off, they're going to probably add in a sixth guy to give everyone an extra day. Whereas when they have built-in days off into the schedule, you don't have to do that as much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, this is not a big deal because I think it makes all the sense in the world. Yeah. And this is what they should be doing. I mean, Clayton Kershaw should not be redlining his, Walker Buehler should not be redlining. If Trevor Bauer wants to start every 5 days, I get it. He's proven he can do it. He's proven he can be durable. And clearly that's what he wants. So knock yourself out. But the rest of these guys getting an extra off day from time to time. Now, he did say, hey, we're not going to do a six-man rotation when we've got days off built into the schedule because then you get, if Kershaw's pitching every 7 days, that's a problem. But I definitely think with May and Gonsolin, you want to get those guys opportunities. So it all kind of makes sense. Okay, here's a Dave Roberts one. This is a curveball for you. He said Nolan Long had a little soreness after his bullpen. Big deal or not a big deal, Daniel? How do you feel about Nolan Long having some soreness after his bullpen?
Look, this is a huge deal. We're counting on this guy to go out and be our ace, start every fifth day, Cy Young type expectations for Nolan Long. So this is huge. You don't want your ace, sore on the first week of camp.
Can you tell me anything about Nolan Long? If they had made up the name Nolan Long and just dropped that quote in there, I would not have been able to tell you that he was on the Dodgers.
It definitely sounds like a generic MLB The Show type name that they just threw in there. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a pitcher's name, Nolan Long. I mean, Nolan Ryan, and he's long.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But anyways, there you go. Nolan Long. I think we're both going not a big deal that Nolan Long has a little bit of soreness. Dave Roberts not concerned either. So shout out to Nolan Long. Okay, here's Mark Pryor again. We got two more of these. This is on Brandon Morrow. If we can get him healthy and consistent, what we expect is hopefully the guy that was here in 2017, a back-end guy who can match up against right and left, ability to get strikeouts. I think that's the expectation. Big deal or not a big deal that Pryor is basically saying the expectation is a back-end reliever for Brandon Morrow, who has on a minor league deal right now.
Yeah, to me, this is a pretty big deal, I'd say. I mean, I wasn't sure what to expect from Morrow coming into camp. We hadn't heard anything about him from the offseason. I didn't even know if he was healthy or what, but it appears he's healthy. And if their expectations are that high, then I can't help but get excited. Like, prime Brandon Morrow with the Dodgers in 2017 was, one of the best relievers in all of baseball. And if that's what they're expecting to get back, then that would be quite the acquisition, quite the addition to this bullpen.
Yeah, and Morrow, he was one of the guys that spoke this week. I was reading through some of the quotes. I mean, he basically hasn't pitched in like 2 full years almost. I mean, he missed like an entire season. Yeah. And he basically said, I don't really know what I got. So I think they asked, like, how do you feel? He's like, I don't know. I haven't thrown in a while. Like, my elbow feels really good. So he had some sort of bizarre surgery he detailed. But yeah, I mean, obviously he trusts the Dodgers. The Dodgers know how to unlock him. It's just a matter of, is the arm going to cooperate? Does he still have the juice left? So we'll definitely see. We'll see there. Okay, last one here, and this is Clayton Kershaw discussing an extension. Obviously, Jorge Castillo has a piece in LA Times. People start freaking out about whether or not Kershaw is going to be a Dodger. Somebody asked, would he discuss an extension with the Dodgers? Quote, absolutely. I don't know what it looks like in the future, but I love being here. I love the Dodgers. I love everything about this organization. Big deal or not a big deal to you?
I'm gonna say it's a big deal, and that I feel like that's what a lot of fans are hoping for. Like, no one wants to see Kershaw retire or go play somewhere else. But I'm gonna say it's not a huge deal in the sense that that quote wasn't anything I wouldn't have expected to
Right.
hear from him. I I don't. If you had to ask me, I don't think an extension gets done before it out. Kind of similar to when he was.
I think we caught you
Oh,
back
sorry,
up, but
you froze there.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I think Kershaw. It's what Dodger fans want to hear. I mean, he has not said, hey, he just basically said, hey, I'm going to do this on a year-to-year basis. We'll see what happens at the end of the year. He loves Los Angeles. Obviously, he's got concerns, as far as he loves his family. He wants to be close to his family. They live in Texas. He wants his kids going to school starting next year. So as a parent myself, I kind of get all of the concerns. But as I think I talked about with Andy McCullough, we were talking about, what do you think about this? And it's kind of like, well, what's he going to do? Like, is he going to go play for the Texas Rangers, who are just a terrible team? Like, how badly does he want to go back? Because I can't imagine a team other than the Texas Rangers being where Kershaw would go. And so I can't imagine a guy having been to the World Series 3 out of the last 4 years, potentially a 4th out of 5, potentially winning another title.